So today
Yeah.
we're talking about keeping up with the 9 core competencies, going into meetings.
All right. Meetings. Love
Yes.
it. Yep.
So, what makes meetings so significant that it is one of the 9 core competencies?
Because without meetings, we can't really align as humans and make sure that, we're talking about the things we need to talk about, right? So you've got the vision, that's one of the core competencies. And then you can have goals and rocks and all these things that you need to get done. And you need to make sure that, they're getting done and you're doing the work that you need to do to get done. There's just always issues, right? Just the nature of running a company. And, someone once said there are 136 issues and they're all over the place and there are lots and lots of issues. But so we just need to figure out how to have a system for coming together and solving issues and then breaking apart so that we're not dealing with a bunch of ad hoc meetings, because that's what happens. If we don't have great structure around meetings, then we don't have a cadence that enables us to be efficient and effective with our time. So if we have no structured meetings, then everybody's running around and just having ad hoc meetings. When they have ad hoc meetings, what happens all the time is that you get these people together and all of a sudden they're like 2/3 the way through this conversation around solving a problem. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, we should have had Joe in here, right? One of the things I've always taught is like the weekly meeting is absolutely one of the most important meetings your team can have. And if you have a weekly meeting, you have it the same day and you have it the same time and you have the same agenda and you start on time and end on time, those are 5 sort of elements of a great meeting. Then if someone comes up to you and says, hey, can we talk about this? You're like, hey, is it urgent? And is it important? And if not, can it wait for our weekly meeting? And you only have to say that 2 or 3 times and then people get it, right? Just leave it for the weekly meeting, because there's very few things, especially if the business is reasonably well run, that are urgent and important. So there are a bunch of different meetings that are core to like becoming really good at running a company. A weekly meeting for your team is a really good one. I believe weekly one-on-ones are really important. There's quarterly planning meetings, there's annual planning meetings, there's state of the company meetings to share everything that's going on. There are tiger team meetings if you have a team pulled together to work on, a rock or a goal, 90-day goal. And there's like 21 meeting types that we think most organizations eventually are going to need to master. One of the ones we haven't talked about is, quarterly conversations or quarterly one-on-ones to talk about how we're doing, right? How am I doing as a leader and a coach, and how are we doing in terms of our agreements? Part of my agreement is to help you develop. And so how am I doing in helping you develop, and how are you doing in terms of, things like, exemplifying our core values, et cetera. So there are a bunch of different types of meetings, and if you get really good at them, then it's sort of like you don't have to think about some stuff. Like, we don't think about whether we're going to put our left leg or our right leg into our pants when we get up in the morning. And so they just really great meetings just sort of give this, and a great meeting cadence just makes the trains run on time, and it helps you all to figure out, how to deal with challenges and what's urgent and what's not urgent, et cetera. So
Yeah, because you have, obviously there's the structure and the cadence and then the types, and the structure would fall under the different types of meetings.
Yeah.
As kind of the cadence would too, but that's a little bit separate.
Right.
But the big thing there is turning that into a habit, right? Where it becomes second nature and it becomes sort of done through intuition. And this is just the language we speak, and the way that we go about doing things. So how do you go from a place of ad hoc meetings to building up towards that becoming a habit, becoming something that is just understood within the organization?
Everything always starts at the top, right? And so, and as you know, we can have an interesting conversation around disciplines versus habits. But to me, a meeting is a discipline, right? And it's a very important discipline. And so, it starts with the founder, the CEO, whoever's the grand poobah, saying, no, it's really important that we have these meetings. And then the question is, how do we do this so that they're really good meetings, right? So, and there are a number of different systems, meeting sort of systems out there, meeting frameworks, let's put it that way, that's even better. It's like, EOS, and we do a very similar version. They have the level 10 meeting and we have our weekly team meeting, but the structure is pretty much identical, right? And the big idea is there's a structure that focuses on the things that we should be doing, right? So, we come together, we segue, right? We connect as human beings, we do personal and professional best from the last week, and then we start looking at the data, and there's a very structured way to look at our scorecards, right? Which is you're focusing on where there are issues, and if there are issues, put it down in the issues list, but don't have a conversation that early in the meeting, because the chances are you could be going off on some tangents and wasting time that otherwise would have been more better spent working on more urgent and important issues. Ultimately, as I said earlier, there's just some disciplines around a great meeting. We talked about 5 of them, right? They're same day, same time, same agenda, start on time, end on time. So let's just talk about same agenda, right? So ultimately, like lots of competencies that we have, we want to become really, really good at our weekly meeting, and then we want to take that competency and then start using it with our departments, and then our department leaders, right? They become really good at that, running their meetings, and then their team leaders become really good at that as well. And so everybody in the company is at a weekly meeting. They all have the same structure, right? We're compounding that competency, right? Because we're all doing the same thing. We're all following the same structure. We all know that we start on time, we end on time. We all follow the same agenda. We all know that we don't have any conversations during the segue. We don't have any conversations during the scorecard. We don't have any conversations during the review of the rocks, right? It's either on track or off track, and if it's off track, should we make it an issue? We don't have any conversation during the headlines and cascading messages. We don't have any conversations during the to-dos, and those are all disciplines, and ultimately we become really good at them, and then we teach the people who work for us how to become really good at them, and then our people who work for us teach the other people how to become really good for them. And so it just becomes this discipline that we're all really, really good at. And even more importantly, because of the structure of this discipline, the vast majority of the time is spent solving problems. And then even there, the discipline we have, right, which is which is our own system, right, is we prioritize our issues. And so 5s are we must talk about them today. 4s are we'd love to talk about them if we have time. 3s are if we we'd like to talk about them, but it's not a big deal. 2s are we don't need to talk about this today. And 1s are like, well, someday we should probably talk about this, or it'll disappear, or we're going to move it to our longer term issues. A lot of times they get deleted, right? But the beauty of that discipline is that we always, at the C-suite level and at the senior leadership team level, we always get through all of our 5s, right? So we're attacking all those things that we absolutely have to attack that week. And we almost always get through all of our 4s. And then, the 3s sometimes we get through. But we're pretty darn efficient at going into the meetings, at getting all the issues resolved. People come out of the meetings. I haven't looked at it. It'd be interesting to look at. But I would say that, our C-suite meetings, probably the average rating is 9.75. The SLT rating is probably similar, right? I would suspect that across the company, most of our meetings are rating, 9.5 or higher. And if they're below 9, we all talk about what it is. And so everybody's constantly working on just getting better and better at that competency, at that discipline.
Yeah, because you're right. You're iterating on the meeting thing as a discipline,
yeah,
and really working on that. And then that adds another basically beneficial effect to the compounding nature of the meetings and how it helps the organization.
Yeah.
And so, right, when you really start seeing those benefits, how do you see that both internally and also with the companies you coach? Mm-hmm. How do you see that affect like performance and health and providing more time and everyone right. In addition to more time, everyone's feeling better about not wasting hours in unnecessary meetings.
Well, I think when you first take on, and just this week I took on my first client in several years. When you take on a client, one of the things you always say is, look, you're going to fight the discipline for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but within 3 to 5 to 6 weeks, you're gonna fight for it as opposed to fight against it. You're gonna you don't want to lose this because all of a sudden you realize how powerful it is. But the litmus test for me, there's several ones, right? I actually look forward to all my meetings. Now, do I look forward to a day full of meetings? I don't, right? And as you know, I have almost all my days are smashed with meetings, right? So that I don't look forward to, but literally every single meeting I enjoy them, right? I look forward to, especially our quarterlies and our annuals. I genuinely look forward to them. I look forward to my weekly meeting with the senior leadership team. I look forward to the C-suite meeting. I look forward to my one-on-ones. I genuinely enjoy the meetings. So, how much more effective are you if you enjoy something versus if you go into it and you're dreading it? I mean, if you go into something dreading it, your brain's going to be, right? That's not a good thing. So I think, one of the beauties of the discipline is that ultimately meetings they're not just productive, they're enjoyable.
I'm sure that's a foreign concept to a lot of people out there, that you can look forward to these things.
Right. Well, if you go online and you search, meetings, you'll see all these people complaining about meetings, and they're a waste of time. There's just a lot of negativity out there around meetings, and I think it's just indicative of it's sad, right? Because they're essential, right? Now, the meetings that I don't like are the ad hoc meetings. We don't have many at all. I bet you we're less than 2% of our meetings are ad hoc meetings. I could be wrong, but it's below 5% for sure.
I think that's accurate, right?
Yeah,
and you see everything about meetings from a negative perspective on LinkedIn, on social media, and some of it's more philosophical, the issues with them, and then some of it's more satirical on social media and saying how it's a waste of time, you don't need to be there, and I think that's only gotten worse or more exaggerated with the remote work and hybrid work, things like being on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's just a lower barrier to entry to just put on someone's calendar and expect them to show up and everything, and versus having people get up and go to a room and sort it out there, because it's also a lot easier just sit in silence on Zoom and do other work.
Yeah. If that's kind of the culture that you're willing to, right, sort of allow to exist. But, I think, we have optional all hands every week, every 2 weeks. And we have 170 people in the company. And I'll bet you our average attendance is between 140 and 150. The only reason I have actually that number's in my head is we have we wait for 5 minutes and we do core value shout outs, or I do stupid dad jokes, or other people participate in the stupid dad jokes. But I'm always watching to see what the number gets up to. And if it's 5 minutes and we're 140, we're off to the races. And, but I think that's a testament, right, to people genuinely want to, it's optional, right? And everybody joins. So it's cool.
It'd be interesting to see the data on, you have all these companies that do similar optional company meeting where it's nothing really super important is discussed.
Yeah.
Sorry to those who think it's very important. Sure.
But it's how we stay connected.
Is on, right? And I feel at most places it'd probably be something that you do for a quarter.
Yeah.
And then you just say nobody cares at the end of it, and you're done with that.
Right. And we've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it obviously there's an effect of social proof where people are doing it, and
Right.
you see a bunch of people going to the thing and you feel compelled to do it.
Right.
But I still think most people actually enjoy it and don't view it as a waste of 30 minutes
Yeah.
every other week.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Right? If we have, what you said, like 21 types of meetings, and you're an organization that doesn't or is not conscious and intentional about their meetings,
Right.
or structure or right? It's all ad hoc.
Right.
What would be the super short version of a hierarchy of meetings that are necessary to have?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Are we talking recurring? Or are we talking just these are the kinds of meetings that you really should have? So as an example, let's do some non-recurring.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you adopt these?
Right.
Right. Like, right. You're not going to do all 21 at once.
No.
So where do you start?
I'm smiling because, we have a lot of customers who just, hear about 90 and they kind of, people say it works really well and it helps you get everybody together. And then where do you start, right? And so we have a lot of those conversations that take place, and we have something called a baseline assessment survey that helps people take a look at how strong they are across the 9 core competencies. And based upon where they're weakest, right, we have recommendation as to where they should, how they should start, getting up and running on 90. So as an example, if they're just weak across the board, I mean, everything, they're like 30%, in terms of vision and structure and people and meetings and all that kind of stuff. The first thing, we recommend is, the founder go away and get really super clear in his or her head on the vision, right? What are we doing? Where are we going? Why are we doing this stuff? Who are we as a people? Right? Some of these things that I refer to as forever agreements, and then come back and have a foundation setting session with their senior leadership team and make sure that they're all on the same page in terms of structure and getting this thing going, getting up and running, and upgrading their business operating system. Now, if they're strong across a bunch of different things, but there's just an issue on vision, then go have a vision setting session. If they're strong across vision and structure, then go have a goal setting session. If they're strong across everything, then just get to work and take advantage of the platform and start having your weekly meetings and set the schedule up for having your quarterlies and your annuals, and then start drilling into thinking about having quarterly conversations, or our version of annual reviews, which, as those of you know me know, I hate. So quarterly, sort of having quarterly, how we doing, and then so every company's different. They all, they're all snowflakes, but eventually, right, you want to master the weekly meeting. You want to master the weekly one-on-one. I know not everybody agrees with me on weekly one-on-ones, but I deeply believe it's a great way for us to have really efficient weekly team meetings, because if stuff belongs in the weekly one-on-one, just have it there. It's also an opportunity for us to just connect as human beings and talk about how things are going. And so, I believe in weekly one-on-ones. I believe in weekly team meetings. I deeply believe in quarterly conversations. I deeply believe in quarterly planning meetings. I deeply believe in annual planning meetings. I deeply believe in state of the company meetings, right? And then, we can talk about, we love the, every other week all hands, and then, helping people think about how they want to run their meetings if they have, cross-functional groups, people involved in a rock, right? So we call them tiger team meetings, right? But, those are the ones right off the top of my head. Obviously, we have investors, so we have board meetings, and then, we have a financial review meeting every month, and every single one of our departments has a financial review meeting with the CFO and his team every single month. So, like I said, there are about 21 of these types of meetings, and you can't master them all. So I do think that you want to move as swiftly as you can to having great weekly team meetings, but to have the great weekly team meeting, it has to have substance. And so the substance is, it should be on what are our priorities? So what are our rocks? So let's get those things done. What's our data look like? So let's start working on the scorecard. And those are things you work on in the sort of setting up sessions, which we call foundation setting and vision setting and goal setting. So I don't know if that's a perfect answer, but But those are the meetings that I think are pretty important.
Right. It's a little bit of a stretch, but
Right.
I think that there could be some people could see, right, there's the team meetings, like the whatever team meetings and your one-on-one meetings. And then you could put your quarterly for the team underneath the team meeting, and then your quarterly conversation underneath the one-on-ones. And then, And so those are the ones that would tend to be ad hoc that you could bucket. And then you also have the externally required meetings, such as a board meeting, right? Like that's probably not in your control as much as the rest of the things.
Right.
And so would you say that there's a little bit of bucketing there?
In terms of
so you could write a team quarterly with the team meeting, and then a one-on-one and a quarterly conversation out of that. Right. Because it's like, if you're viewing it like that, you could almost say mastering the weekly meeting and having those repetitions and having that group dynamic really function well is essential to having a good quarterly. Just like a healthy one-on-one weekly is essential to having a good quarterly conversation.
100%.
Right. And so if we're trying to figure out how do you implement these, it's small steps with the little ones, with the weekly, getting those things in and making sure that all of that runs smoothly. Yeah. Right. And then new people will come into the team and they assimilate into that. Right. And they become part of that culture. Right. Part of that habit, and they adopt it more easily because it's at this point just so resonant. Yeah.
And don't forget that, what we do is a part of our onboarding, our 90-day onboarding, is we actually incorporate the quarterly conversation into our onboarding. So instead of it being quarterly, after the first month, there's the equivalent of a quarterly conversation, same agenda, right? So core values and roles and responsibilities and to-dos and then how am I doing as a leader and how am I doing as a coach, and various sort of questions for us to sort of align on. Yeah, so we're putting people into the weekly meeting, we're putting them into the quarterly conversation within the first 30 days and of course we're putting them into team meetings within the first 30 days of them joining the company.
Yeah, with team meetings and one-on-ones, that's right away. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you're getting thrown into that, and there's been several people recently that we've brought into, like, for example, the newsletter meeting. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we haven't even had your welcome to the team meeting yet. It's like, hi. Yeah. So we're bringing someone in on a whole new program, as well as a whole new meeting structure. And if we're worried about the structure and that's a whole front of mind thing, that's not going to be a productive 30 minutes where we also have all these other things that we need to accomplish. And so I guess all that to say that it makes me think of like sort of a web of the type of meetings and how they interact with each other. And you got to master some things before moving on to other things. And
100%. Yeah.
Right. That sort of hierarchy of and prioritization.
Yeah. And then there's an onboarding meeting, right? And then in the onboarding process, they learn about the meetings, right? We have briefs and guides on this stuff that we think is important for people to read. So early on, they've got some sense for the craziness of all this. You hear from dozens of people. We've heard from dozens of people over the years that, this is a breath of fresh air when they come in here, and these meetings are like they're healthy. They're not like there's no tension. Like you're doing real issues and real problem solving, but they're like, wow, that was like, I remember last quarterly, a couple of the new people was like, wow, I was worried that moment would like make the whole rest of the meeting kind of weird. And it was like, man, you guys, like you went there, you had a hard conversation. You're like, this is the decision. And everybody's like, oh, next. And it's like, there's no dust. There's no like negative energy. It's just like we move on. And we're, by having people like 2 or 3 levels in meetings together, they're like, wow, okay, cool, right? I can do that. I'm allowed to, push back. I'm allowed to, we can have some of these, disagreements. And it's like, wow, that's kind of healthy. So, and then the other thing we didn't mention is what we do is within, I think within a month, every month or so, I'm pretty sure it's plus or minus every month, I have a new employee. So like every single person who's been hired in the last 30 days, they get a full hour. It's like whatever you want to talk about, any questions you have as you've got. And some of the times like, this is my first day. It's like, cool, welcome. So that's another one of our meetings that we, we deeply believe in.
Right. Yeah. And sort of I think one of the fun things about our system and being flexible, right, is, okay, try this thing out. Does this meeting style work? And then we incorporate it into our teaching materials.
Right.
Right. So we're not putting anything out there that we're not testing ourselves and really understanding and mastering.
Yeah.
And truly integrating. And right, if it's not beneficial, if we don't see the use in it, we don't have time to deal with something that's sort of vestigial.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah. There's no leg. I don't think we have any legacy. We're not doing things that we shouldn't be doing. I mean, knock on wood, right? I mean, obviously I'm sometimes up here and don't see everything, but I don't think we've got a lot of that. I mean,
even if it is right, there's probably a small negligible percent of those types of things,
right,
as there will be in any group,
right?
But it's obviously it's so negligible that it doesn't. It basically, for all practical purposes, does not exist.
Yeah, I would say, and I'd say that's part of the culture, is because generally speaking, everybody here deeply cares, and we've talked about it, right? They deeply care about all of our ideal stakeholders. It's not, we don't put customers over employees or employees over customers or, any of that nonsense. And they know that, part of being here, part of the culture is, if you see something, you got to let us know. If you're going to talk about someone behind their back, you got to say, hey, Joe and Joe, Sue and I were talking about you, Cole, and, this is what we're talking about. And so that's, we just don't do that stuff. So I think there's a lot of, and those are meetings, right? That's kind of like a, part of our culture, our cultural norms around even how to behave in a meeting, right? What's cool, what's uncool.
Yeah. And right, it comes back to core values and being inquisitive, like, is this working? Is this not working?
Right.
Why? And then best in terms of, let's be better and better at this.
Yeah.
And it's
I
all
want
progress.
And respect that everybody wants to be better and better at this. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't feel particularly good, but that's why we have resiliency as a core value. So, I don't think I've ever said this before, in this, not on the podcast, but just generally speaking, right? But it's uncool if you assume that someone can't handle just the truth, right? If you got, lettuce in your teeth, right? You got, it's uncool to not let them know they've got lettuce in their teeth. So, right, that's part of who we are.
It's all back to agreements. We enter this thing with an agreement that we're going to be truthful, specific, and positive about everything.
Yeah.
And
that we're going to live up to our agreements. We're going to live up to our agreements. Weekly meetings are agreements, right? The agenda, literally, the agenda itself is an agreement, right? And the cadence of the meetings, that's an agreement, right? Boom, boom, boom. And one of our agreements is onboarding. You have basically the quarterly conversation. It's every 30 days until such time as you've gone 90 days. And if after the 90 days, we feel like you still haven't gotten to the point where we can sort of let you run because you understand, you understand the seat, you're competent enough to be able to do the things, then we keep running that 30 days. And if that keeps going too much longer, then guess what, right? This probably, we probably messed up, and that's a shame on us, but, we're going to have to, maybe there's another place in the organization if you're a great core value fit, but if you're not, then but if there's not a seat available that makes sense for you, then, we're going to do our best to help you move on, and because that's the right thing for everyone, including you.
Yeah, right. You don't want to let that negatively compound.
Yeah, it's just uncool for people to just be unhappy, right? What do we say? Work shouldn't suck.
So now's a good time to let you know that you have lettuce in your teeth.
Do I?
No. I was like, oh, yeah. Wish you would have told me before this started. No, it's good. That's, yeah. All right. So that's
on that note.
On that note, yeah. Cool. That's it.
All
Awesome.
right. Thanks, man.